Hey there, everyone. Welcome. Chad with Data Prep U here. Welcome to this week's weekly challenge. First off, happy November to everyone. I hope everyone had a safe and happy Halloween here in North America. I know that we certainly did, and we had piles and piles of candy. Okay, let's hop into what we are going to be working through today. So let me go ahead and shrink my little video here just to get myself out of the way a little bit. So this is challenge 292. It's all about pivoting, prepping, and reporting. So this week's challenge is list information about a local soccer team or local soccer team players, including an ID number, the group, the team they belong to, and the region from which they came. So what we have to do is use the data set within our YXZP file, our Alteryx zip file, to show the count of IDs for each group based on the region and respective team. Arrange and prepare the data so the number of players in each group is listed under each region and team, and create a report that illustrates the data you arranged in the previous step. Now, as a reminder, I have not at all had any background in this particular challenge. Up until this point, I haven't even read the description. So just want to give everyone a heads up and honestly, just really recreate or create the actual build experience on the weekly challenge, for better or worse. Now, this could, of course, be a little bit dangerous because if I end up not solving the problem or struggling a little bit, you're going to see that. But the key here, the key takeaway that I want you to walk away with is that it's not necessarily, solving the problem. It's how we actually think about approaching that problem, okay? And then if we do have a challenge, which we are going to have, this is the real world. We are going to have challenges every single day. It's how do we overcome those challenges? How do we pause, think a minute, and approach these logically and actually think through each step of the way? So I'm going to go ahead and download my start file here, my YXCP, and go ahead and click on that so it opens up the challenge. I already have Alteryx open here with a blank workflow, so I'm going to go ahead and import this challenge. Successful import, so yep, go ahead. So just in case you weren't aware or you are just now getting started, whenever you actually download that YXZP file, that is an Alteryx zipped file, or zip package. So when you click on that or double click on that, it will actually unpack those files. It unzips them into their own folder. Now, as always, for those of you who've been watching along, once we open up the challenge, the very first thing that I want to do is run the workflow because I want to actually look at my data. So I'm going to scroll down just a little bit because I need to give myself a little bit of wiggle room here, a little bit of real estate, a little bit of breathing room. I'm going to move even my output over here. But what I see is we've got one data set, our input data set here, with the actual number or what looks like a record ID number. And this does attach directly to just whatever the record number is here. So I see the group that they are in, 190 or 91 to 180, the team that they're in, and the regions. And the expected output here is going to be a report. So we get to use the reporting tools today. This is an excellent lesson then in the reporting tools, and there's even a little bit of formatting, so this is going to take a little bit to go through the formatting, but what we see is we've got a region 1, region 2, region 3, but we've got a little bit of conditional formatting and color coding as well. So for each region, it looks like we've got the total built up. So whenever it says region 1, it's all the teams within region 1, all nicely grouped together. Now this may take a little bit to work through, but let's go ahead and just get started. The very first thing we need to do is we need to actually get all of this data combined and grouped together. And I noticed that we've got the different areas here. So the 16 to 20, for example, 21 to 30, 31 to 60, and so forth. These are our headers. And then greater than 180 looks like it's just got some underscores. This tells me that this is a crosstab tool. Immediately, this is a crosstab tool. So let's start there. I'm going to go into my favorites category. I've added the crosstab tool, or what's also known as kind of the pivot tool, directly into my favorites category. So I'm going to go ahead and start with this just to see what happens. Now, as soon as I've done that, my example, my result that I'm trying to get to has gone away. So here's another little tip for you. I'm going to go into my output here, and there's a little option within, excuse me, the browse window at the bottom here under actions. There's actually a new window option. So I'm going to go ahead and hit new window. And what this allows me to do is this pops up our data in a new window, but because we have a report snippet, because we have a reporting function in here, I have a report tab. So now I can actually keep this up. I can take a look at what my expected output is supposed to look like over here on the right hand side. I'm going to leave my run button a little open here. Even though I tend to use keyboard shortcuts Control R to run the workflow, I'm going to leave that open just in case. All right, now the other side of things is now that I have this open, I also have the ability to then pin this to the top. And now, just because this is Monday morning, I have also forgotten to highlight my mouse, so let's go ahead and do that just to make it a little bit easier for everyone to see. There we go. All right, so here, different regions coming in. I'm going to go ahead and look at my incoming data. So once again, here's our different IDs. I don't think that's going to be relevant. I've got the regions as well with the groups. Now, this now tells me that these are all going to be counts. So the first thing that we might need to actually do is then just, again, I'm going to pivot this. I don't think this is necessarily the right call, but I'm going to go ahead and pivot this around just to see what we've got. So we've got the different regions. Let's go ahead and group both on team and on region. And then the new column headers are actually going to be within that group itself. And then the values, we don't necessarily have a value at this point. Now we could look at the ID. We could look at any of these other values in here. So we could actually do just a count on the SR number. Now this is kind of an arbitrary number at this point, but in doing this, it does let me just count these values. And then at the final, in the end here, I want to also create maybe a totals row, but I don't think this is also going to create what I want. So Control R to run the workflow. Let's see what we got here. So immediately I've got our team, I've got our region, and then we've got the different counts. So I can see that we've got count for team 1, region 1, team 1, under region 1 is 21. Okay, so this is good. This is beginning to get me what I need to do. But this also then will have a totals column over here. So I do have count 180, excuse me, in this case. So team 1, region 1 does have a null value for 180, but there's also a total column in here. That's what I've noticed. So I'm going to scroll down. Let's add a totals column. So the crosstab tool does give you the ability to add a totals column. Once again, Control R to run the workflow. And then now I actually have a nice little totals column. Now this is not giving me exactly what I thought for some reason, because it is also adding in some additional info that I'm not quite expecting in here. So something is definitely going on. Something is definitely kind of strange with how that totals column is actually getting calculated. And that's not something that I would expect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove that total column for now, because we can then add that in at a different date. Excuse me. All right. So now that we've got this, we've started to build this up a little bit. I'm going to go into the reporting category here, and let's go ahead and begin with a table. So I'm going to start with the table. Now in this case, we do have grouping options for the table. So we can see that we've got a group for the region. Now what that's going to do is that's actually going to give us a separate bit of info for that region. Now before going any further, once again, just Control R to run the workflow. I want to see that we've got all of these different regions in all of these different tables. So let's go ahead and add a browse tool. Now in this case, I'm going to use Control Shift and the letter B for browse, and then I'm going to run the workflow here. Now in this case, now I see the team, the region, and all of that other info that is relevant to me. Now I have those counts up to 180. I don't have that total column in this case, but everything else is lining up nicely. So I'm starting to get to exactly where I need to go. Now, the different counts, I can probably go through at this point and remove those as a prefix. So we could do this a couple of different ways, but what I'm going to do is actually use a select tool. Now there's a select tool. You could also use the dynamic rename tool. So I'm going to actually use the select tool, and I'm going to actually highlight all of our options that say count. And I'm going to actually go into remove prefix, and there's a count underscore that is consistent among all of them. So this is using the select tool. Again, you could use the dynamic rename tool as well. That would also give you the exact same result. But the dynamic rename tool is, of course, more dynamic. Once again, I've mentioned this in many other live weekly challenges. We're just trying to solve a problem right now. I'm not necessarily handing this over to a customer per se. I'm trying to answer a question very quickly. We can always go back and update things as needed later on. So here we go. Team, region. So what I'd like to do is actually remove that team column name. We'll have a region there. We can actually do that directly in the table tool itself. However, we also want to make sure we have a totals row. So that totals row specifically for each region. So we might have to do this I can think of a couple of different ways to do this. I want to play around with the table tool and see if there's any other potential way that we can actually do this. Now we still have all of our info in here. I'm going to remove the actual region column because that does not exist. But under team, I'm going to rename this to region. Now this is automatically renamed as well based off of whatever region that actually is. So this is actually not something that I'm going to rename in this case. And if you watched me last week, they probably updated this a little bit. So there's a space in our rename. So if I just add in a space, we don't necessarily see what those actually are. Now I did get a little bit of an error, but it does give me the result I need. The last two things that I need before I start going into color coding is I'm going to need a totals column on everything here, but I'm also going to need a totals row on each of these as well, just as a quick double check here. So let's say 16 to 20 is 8, so it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So yeah, so each region has a totals row and a totals column. Once again, for some reason, mine, whenever I actually go in and add the totals column within my crosstab tool, so if I go in and do a total column and total row, even with that specific grouping, I, again, don't believe it's going to give me exactly what I need because the totals row gives me an entire total for everything. It's not a total per group, all right? It's not a total per group. But then if we take a look at, again, our totals column, for some reason, this one is actually, again, I'm not entirely sure what the heck is going on with that. Something is definitely not counting up properly unless it's actually just looking at like the ID here or something, or there's something else that's not correct within this. So what I'm going to do is we're gonna change this up once again. I'm going to keep my counts in there. I'm going to remove totals row and totals column, and we're going to do a couple of things. One, I'm going to branch off a separate summarize tool here, because what this is going to allow me to do is with this incoming data, I'm going to do a group on region. So let's do a group by on region. Once again, and then something here is off. So we have here, we've got region team 1, all of my counts coming in. Okay, there we go. So now we have all of our info here. Let's go ahead and add with that group by. Let's do a sum off of each of these. And what I'm going to do is actually rename. You know what? Let's do the easy button. Let's do the easy route. I'm going to go ahead and add in a select tool once again, options, remove prefix, and let's remove the sum count prefix. So now we have that nice totals row. So 0 to 5 is 144. So that's looking proper. Then we've got the 6 to 10 is 35. So that looks okay as well. Now, next, we're going to do something a little bit easier here. I'm going to actually, before I add in a full totals column on all of these, which I'm going to do kind of the manual way because I would generally prefer to do it more dynamic. In this case, I'm going to create a full total column out of all of these, but I need to union all of this information together, and I want to stack it in a way that's going to be appropriate. Now, the way that we're going to do this, I've got my specific region here. We can do this a couple of different ways, and I'm going to take a way that I know is going to absolutely create the best experience that I need. So it's going to make this a little bit easier. I'm going to create a formula tool, and I'm going to actually add a column in here, and I'm going to call this well, actually here, before we even start going into this, let's just start with that union tool. So I'm going to union in our regions. I'm going to union in our totals with all of our other information. So now we should have all of this data nicely stacked back together. The last thing is we need to sort this in a way. And it looks like for some reason, did I lose my, oh, you know what? Because I need to take this, paste that back here, because I need this to be actually more set up properly. Let's add in another select tool. All right, checking this out. Here we go. Now everything is nicely stacked by name, so 0 to 5. But if we go all the way to the bottom, we're also going to have the region totals in here as well. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for the region. These are our total columns, so 21 here. So we're starting to look, or excuse me, there's the 21 here. We should have a 144 in here, which is right here. So all of these at the very bottom, these are all of our totals. So we need to do a couple of things here. We're going to sort based off of that region, but we also need to sort based off of something else. So where I was going with this is I'm going to add in a quick little formula tool, And I'm just going to create a new column, and I'm going to call this sort. And we're going to populate this very first one. I'm going to say int 16. Actually, I mean, we could even say byte. And I'm going to call this one a 2. And then I'm going to copy and paste this. Now, this is, again, just a little trick here that I'm going to start doing. I'm going to use this as 1. And then after our union tool, I'm going to add in a sort tool. Because what this is going to be able to allow me to do is sort based on region and then sort based on that sort order. In both cases, we're going to do ascending. And what that does is, again, we're kind of throwing it a head fake here because then it puts that totals row at the very, very top of every single region. So every single totals row is now at the top of the region itself, okay? Now, because of that, we can also go through, we've got another formula tool here. This is where I'm going to actually add in my total column row here, or my total column. But I also have the ability to, once again, go into my select tool itself. I'm going to actually remove my rename under team here. I'm going to remove that little rename. I'm going to put it in here. But under this team that we're actually working with, I'm going to put a space in here to rename that team at the very, very, very end. I don't believe I necessarily need the actual region name at this point, but what I am going to do is another quick little, if the team is null, populate it with the region. So let's start there. So let's go into that team, and we're going to say if is null team, whoops, not the date, time, first of month. Again, you guys are seeing everything kind of as is. Then we're going to do region. Else we want to do the team, and if. Okay, so let's do a quick double check on our overall results outside. So here we have region 1, and then all of the different teams within region 1. Then region 2, all of the different teams within region 2. Doing a little bit of repositioning, I'm going to take this team. If you right click and hold, I can move that to the very, very top and then uncheck region here. Again, we're starting to get closer to where we needed to go. So region 1 with team 1 through 7, we got the totals row here. The last bit that we need is, let's remove that sort because we don't need it at this point. What we are going to need the actual total column. So once again, I would normally do this probably a little bit more of a dynamic way, but in this case, I'm going to actually go through and just go ahead and create my total, which does appear to be whole numbers. So instead of a double, let's go ahead and do like an int 32, and we're literally just going to say 0 to 5 plus, and you know what, we can even go into here plus, and I'm going to actually even do like a copy of my plus sign here to make it easy. 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 30, 31 there, 61 there, 91 there, and then finally the last one will be that 180. So let's do a quick little check here. How are we looking? So we have the total of 351. For some reason, I am getting some null values on this total here. So I need to figure out what's going on with my final total. Why is that not actually coming out properly? Because I've got under total here, everything seems to be appropriate, but for some reason my final output is not actually going out correctly. All right, so it could be because we've got just null values in here, most likely. So we may need to do a little bit of prep. Now our result actually has blank or null values. It does not show a 0 in here. So from a proper perspective, my guess is if we were to use a data cleanse tool in this, and we actually did just replace the zeros or replace numbers with zeros, most likely what's going to happen is we're actually going to get a full actual proper list here. Now, the problem now is then we had an if is null, so we're going to say if is empty team. Now that should again give us the proper results. So we've got region 1 team, we've got the totals going down the line. Now ours are zeros, which, to be perfectly honest, I would prefer that. I would prefer those to be zeros instead of nulls. So we're actually getting to where we need to go. The last bit is the actual color coding. So we've got all of our data in here. I'm going to go ahead and do a quick little check. Unfortunately, we have a quote unquote missing column in here. So I'm going to go back and let's delete this and just recreate it because I want this to be a little bit cleaner whenever it comes into how we're actually going to set this up. But at this point, we don't even necessarily need any specific grouping in here. However, I'm realizing now there is a grand total at the very, very, very bottom of everything, which again, we could set this up in a pretty easy way, but the very first thing that I want to do is just make sure everything else is starting to look a little bit more appropriate. So now we're going to get into some color coding. So how many of you have had experience in reporting tools? Anything? Good, bad, yes, no? Well, let's go into it here. So let's start with just some different color coding. What I'm going to do first is within this column header here, I'm going to create a column rule, and I'm going to apply this rule, and I'm going to say header color. Now what this allows us to do is say always to the header only, and we're going to update that background color here. There's a light blue. It looks like there's like a lighter kind of Alteryx blue. Now I've got a blue that's more of a Data Prep U blue. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in, close it, quick run, and now we actually see that we've got that particular, column. I did not do a row rule, I apologize. So we did a column rule here. So we actually want to reduce or remove that column rule because that was not correct. We need a row rule because we need the entire piece. We need that entire row to be totally set up. So we're going to do a row rule if the row, in this case, when the row number is not necessarily there always. There's not necessarily a way that we can do that always in here. So let's start with the region. So whenever we have the actual blank here equals, or we need to actually say contains in this case, which does not have a contains in here, which is also interesting. So we need to go into a formula here, a custom formula. So what we're going to do is whenever the actual value here, we're going to do a contains statement. So let's go contains, and my caps is on, contains, all right, our blank piece here, whenever it contains the word region, essentially, if that exists, we're going to update that entire background color. We're going to change this to kind of a light pumpkin-y orange. So let's go ahead and see how that goes here. Now I'm going to go ahead and hit close. Let's do a quick little run, Control R to test this. Now we've got some region color coding, okay? Now we don't have that grand total, which looks like the actual color. So let's go ahead and do a quick update on our row rule here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to just lighten this up just a little bit over here and click OK. All right, now I'm confident in that. So this row rule specifically, though, we're going to call region. And then now what we also need to do is add another row rule that it's going to be called grand total. So now we've got the grand total in here. We still need to actually add the grand total, but whenever we say that this value here equals, and we're going to actually say grand total, then we're going to go back to that background color. We're going to update this to that more kind of orangey, pumpkin-y orange here. So let's go ahead and add that. Now, once again, we don't have that value yet. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, Control R to run. We don't have that grand total. The final thing within the table is let's go ahead and update all of those headers. Now there's default table settings in here. And what we can do is go into those headers right here and just simply add in that background color. Once again, I'm going to use the Data Prep U blue that I have added into my custom colors, and then do another quick run. So the final output here, we've got that blue. We could make that a little bit lighter. It looks like they may have even bolded that and increased the font a little bit. So what I will say is you can get some pretty solid customization within everything that happens here. You can get extremely customized. Now, what I'm going to do is there's probably a little bit more that we can do with that grand total. I'm going to go ahead from a time perspective. I know that if I go in here and do another summarize, right? I like to do this right before my kind of final select. So let's add this in. But what I'm going to do is not do any grouping whatsoever. And I'm going to actually add in everything that we have here, minus that team and that sort, just any numeric value that I actually have, and just do a sum off of everything here. And then once again, let's add in another select tool. There's a lot of preparation in here, but I'm going to select everything that I have, options, remove that sum underscore. But I also want to update this because if I look at my values here, I do not have this kind of blank column. So I need to add a little like blank column here, but in this case, it's actually going to be called region, or excuse me, actually going to be called in our case, we're going to have this region value, or this region column. So notice how we have here region 1, 2, 3, team, the teams and so forth. So I'm going to actually add in that team column here and then union everything back in one more time. Let me go ahead and scroll over just a little bit. Now let's go ahead and add a formula tool. And now you'll see where I'm going with this. I'm going to add a column called team. Let's leave that as a string value here, but we're going to then populate this with just that grand total. Now, what's nice about this is we're going to union all of our existing data along with all of our new data, auto-config by name. If we do a quick check in here, what we should have is everything that we possibly need, including that team field. But I'm going to set a specific output order as well, just to force that grand total to be at the very, very, very bottom here. And then finally, if we look at our table, we now have that nice grand total column with comma separators, with our specific color coding for everything we have here. So, all right, everyone, thanks for sticking around and just watching how we solve that specific problem. It did take a little bit, but there's a lot of preparation. It seemed like it was relatively straightforward, but as we got into the data, it just continued to snowball a little bit. But the key here is hopefully you were able to see that when I encountered a challenge, when I encountered a problem, I was able to quickly go back and resolve that and solve that issue. Once again, this is Chad Martin. I hope you found this valuable. If you did, those likes and subscribes always help out. If you want to be notified when we start our live stream for this, click on that little bell icon, and that's going to let you know when we have those live streams and send you a notification to your phone if you'd like to see me walk through this in a live manner. All right. Thanks again, everyone. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Once again, happy Halloween. I hope everyone had a safe and happy Halloween. And then finally, happy November. All right, we've got the holidays right around the corner. Thanks so much, everyone.